Welcome to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Player Ranks. In this series, we rank various Yu-Gi-Oh! Themes based on your comments and suggestions. Come back every Tier List Tuesday to see an all-new installment of this series. Alright guys, welcome to another episode of rating every single card in an archetype. Today we are doing Mirror Force. This one's very, very exciting. I love the Mirror Force cards. Iconic cards. Used to be probably the best card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it was the best trap card for so many years. But obviously, we'll get to it throughout the video. To a certain degree, it's dropped off. But let's get started. We'll be rating all the Mirror Force cards. If you would like to give us any suggestions on which videos you want to see, what tier list you want to watch next, please drop it in the comment section below. Obviously, like, subscribe, all that great stuff. Let's get started as soon as possible. So right here, we've got Dark Mirror Force. Dark Mirror Force is not a good card. It's a terrible card. It actually goes into F tier. Basically, this one is when your opponent declares an attack, you can destroy all of their
banish.
Yeah, you can banish all defense position monsters they control, which is completely counterintuitive. It's like a card made to play around Mirror Force. Like it's like if your opponent's like 2 steps ahead of you, you're 2 steps ahead of your opponent. That's basically what this card is. It never panned out. It never saw any competitive play. I don't think I've ever seen anyone ever run this card. It was a worthless ultra rare for the longest period of time. Usually you want to destroy the monsters that are attacking, not the monsters that are defending, and therefore this card is just kind of bad.
Yeah, the amount of setup it takes is just like if you had like some crazy card that like switched everything to the defense position, and then so you activated this and then chained that and then you banished everything. But by then it's taking too much. It's like it's not gonna resolve. Nothing's gonna happen. But this is the best looking card in the archetype for sure. Yeah, this is the best looking Mirror Force.
Completely goes against like the entire point of the deck, honestly.
And it also is the only one that banishes.
Yes. Next, we've got Radiant Mirror Force. This one's easily another F tier. Probably still better than Dark Mirror Force. But basically, this is regular Mirror Force, but your opponent has to have 3 monsters when attacking. It is 3 attack position monsters?
Yeah, 3 or more attack position.
Yeah, 3 attack position monsters when attacking. So the reason that this card is just an objectively worst Mirror Force is because during the time that this card was released, Mirror Force was banned. It was just too good to be in the game. So they had to make a watered down version of Mirror Force that would actually be usable in the game. And this version actually did see some play, but just because now we have 3 Mirror Forces and they're almost never played, there's really no point to even run a Radiant Mirror Force because it's just in every single possible way just a worst Mirror Force. The only reason you would play this is if you were so obsessed with regular Mirror Force that you needed to play 3 more Radiants. Yeah, that's literally the only reason. But overall, there's just no play.
Yeah, or you could just play Trap Trick, which would be better.
Yeah. And I thought you were going to drop the knowledge about
yeah. Radiant Mirror Force is actually the only Mirror Force card that has an ultimate rare.
Yeah.
Sadly, like it is a nice looking card. It is a nice looking ultimate rare, but there are more deserving cards.
Yeah, the only card out of all of these that actually got a mirror for an ultimate rare.
But I think all the relevant ones have secrets, so
yeah,
there's at least that.
Next is Mirror Force Launcher. This card's probably like a D tier. It's really not good. This card is actually one of the more recent cards. It is the most recent Mirror Force card. So basically, what this card does is during the main phase. So you have to remember.
No, during your main phase.
I'm sorry, even worse. During your main phase, you can discard a monster, specifically a monster, to add a Mirror Force card from your deck to the graveyard.
No, not Mirror Force card. Mirror Force specifically.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. You specifically add a Mirror Force. So like classic, regular, old-fashioned Mirror Force to your hand. So you have to, during your main phase, this is a trap card, right? So imagine you went first. You set this card. It was unusable your entire opponent's turn. Then you have to wait till it's back on your turn. Now you activate it, discard a monster to search a Mirror Force. And now your opponent knows that you have a Mirror Force in hand. So what kind of moron is going to attack you when they know you have a Mirror Force? It's just horrific. Now this also has a graveyard effect, which is if this set card is destroyed by your opponent's card effect sent to the graveyard, you can set Mirror Force and this card back to your side of the field. Which again, if you set Mirror Force, your opponent knows you have Mirror Force. So they're just going to pop the Mirror Force, or they're just not going to attack until they have a way to get rid of Mirror Force. It's one of the stupidest cards ever. It tells your opponent that you have Mirror Force. The second effect is better than the first effect just because the first effect is so bad. But the second effect is still pretty bad because it still reveals to your opponent that you are playing Mirror Force. And you're basically telling him, hey, don't run into this because don't attack. Wait till you have a way to get around this.
And what else is weird about it is that so if they destroy it, let's say they destroy it during their turn, they like lightning storm me or something. So it resets itself and it sets a Mirror Force from hand, deck, or grave, which is like pretty cool. And then you can activate both that turn. But it doesn't matter that you can activate this turn, the Mirror Force launcher, because you can't use it during your opponent's turn. So there's like no point to it. It's just such a terribly designed card. I think even if they made a you know how they made the spell to search Torrential Tribute?
Yeah. That card's actually good.
Yeah, that card's like very well designed. But even if they made a card just like that from Mirror Force,
it still wouldn't be good enough.
It'd still be bad.
Yeah, I don't understand why this card is so overly restrictive. It's too much. You can only do it during your opponent's main phase. I mean, during your main phase. You have a discard cost. It has to be a monster. You add just regular Mirror Force, not any of these other Mirror Force, specifically regular. It's so restrictive. Like, I don't understand what they were thinking when they were designing this card. It's such a bad card. And in the end, it just searches Mirror Force. Mirror Force hasn't seen any meta relevance in probably, how many years? Probably at least 8.
I don't even know.
8 years at least. I don't think I've seen Mirror Force in a single deck. Like, you have to go through all of those hoops to set a card that hasn't been activated or played in 10 years. Really, really bad legacy support. This could have been so much better. This could have let you activate Mirror Forces from the hand. This could have let you set a Mirror Force every single turn with no discard cost. Like, even if those effects were on this card, it still wouldn't be broken. It still wouldn't be good. It still wouldn't make Mirror Force like a meta card. So it's very frustrating. Very, 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 very bad legacy support. Next is Quaking Mirror Force. This one's a little controversial. So this one's either B or C tier. Where did we settle it on this? I think we settled on...
I think...
Yeah.
I think it's C tier.
Yeah, C tier. This one's very controversial.
And stuff like that.
This one's controversial. So it's very good against XYZ decks. It's very good against Synchro decks. It's almost useless against Link decks because...
They've already went into the Link monsters and are attacking.
Once they have a Link monster, Link monsters can't get booked. So that's just useless there. This is also very, very bad against Ritual decks because Rituals can be tributed even when face down. And this is also very, very bad against Fusion decks because monsters can be fused even when face down. So if you look at the 5 summoning mechanics, it's actually bad. It's bad against 3 of them, which... and that's assuming that they didn't have any negates when they went into the battle phase to try to stop this card. So in a lot of ways, this card is just not good enough, unfortunately. But against the decks that it is good. Like if you play against like Zodiacs and you book their like those things are stuck forever. They're gone. They can't make Zeus. It's actually a really, really good card. But again, if you play against the deck that is if you play against Tearlaments and you book their monsters, it doesn't matter. They'll just fusion summon. And they'll just play around this card, and then just activate the graveyard effect. So it's very, very iffy. It really depends on the matchup. Next is regular old classic Mirror Force. This is actually C or B tier.
I think
it's.
I want to go with B just because in like a casual sense.
It's also very good for very long.
Yeah. Like just because of like the legacy of the card. Like
this card is very, very strong. It's not good in the game today. Like this, we have to be honest with ourselves. It's not good today.
In a meta relevant standpoint.
It is not. This card is not meta relevant at all. You will not see any top decks in current Yu-Gi-Oh with this card in it, and that's because you cannot afford to play Yu-Gi-Oh cards in your deck that don't do anything until a certain activation window. That's kind of the problem. It's not a free card that you it would be cool if this card was just a free card that you got to search on top of whatever else you already did. But the problem is this card you have to set and you have to wait for your opponent to specifically attack, and if they have negates of any kind they can just prevent this card from activating, so it doesn't even matter. This card basically has to survive any back row removal until the battle phase. You have to hope that your opponent's not playing any negates whatsoever, and then most monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh, and this is why regular Mirror Force isn't that great, most monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh have protection from destruction, or they float. So, like, if they attack and you do destroy their monsters, it doesn't even hurt them that much that they're going to the graveyard. And if you destroy them, you might trigger their other effects. And a lot of them just have straight up protection from card effects, so it won't even do anything to them even if you wanted to. Unfortunately, and this is kind of the bigger problem with Mirror Force, it's one of those things that it's been super power crept. Trap cards in general have been super power crept. The only ones that really survive are ones that activate from the hand and the ones that are floodgates. Unfortunately, regular Mirror Force is just not strong enough to be meta relevant today, but obviously just because of the legacy of this card, it's been good for very, very long.
Yeah, it's been insane. Like,
yeah,
what did we say? It was like at 1 for like so many years.
It was banned for so many years.
It was banned. It was limited, and then they made like replacements like Sakuretsu armor.
Yeah, Sakuretsu armor.
Like those are just 1-for-1 trades. It's like clears the whole board. But in a casual sense, like sometimes this card will definitely catch people off guard, and it will definitely get you wins. And even though like we said, in a meta standpoint, it's just not good enough. It's just like there's so many cards with protection and stuff like that, negates. But there are decks that just sometimes they just don't make negates, and like I guess you could win against those, like Phantom Knights, Heroes. Like, they don't make like spell and trap negates, or Heroes don't make any negates. But even still, there's just better cards you could play. Like you can play like evenly matched and stuff like that. So there's no other because the graveyard's so important nowadays in Yu-Gi-Oh that like they'll just reuse something else. They have something else to do. But because of the legacy of the card.
Yeah,
solid.
That's why it is where it is. The only deck it's really good in is like one of those really, really like
anti-meta.
Yeah, anti-meta decks. That's
we
about
like protecting like Inspector borders, False Dinos.
Yeah. Next is Drowning. This one's one of my favorites. I like Drowning a lot. It's probably like somewhere in B tier. Basically, what this card does is when your opponent attacks directly, so specifically directly, you can shuffle all cards, all attack position monsters back into your opponent's deck. This one, again, I like a lot. It's actually quite strong. If this resolves, you usually win the duel. The only issue is it does have to be a direct attack. And this actually matters. Like, shuffling back into your opponent's deck actually does matter because, I mean, those resources are pretty much gone. They can't float because they're not in graveyard. It doesn't target. It doesn't destroy. It's very good against a lot of decks. It's just, again,
they don't have the resources back in hand.
Yeah, they don't have the resources.
All over again.
Yeah, it's the problem is the direct attack thing, because sometimes you'll have like 2-3 monsters on board. They'll attack over one, they'll attack over another, they'll attack over another, and by then they might not have any more monsters left, or they've done a significant amount of damage. And maybe the whole reason you're playing Mirror Forces a lot of time is to protect your monsters. But if this is only direct attack, basically you're if it's only direct attack, you're going to lose your field, basically. But it's good in certain decks. It really is. Decks that don't make like huge boards or like very, very like heavy control decks. Like if this was in an Eldritch list, I could see this in like a regional Eldritch list, because Eldritch doesn't really put a lot of monsters on board at all times. Most of the time they have a lot of floodgates. So if you activate like Goes in Match against, what are they called? If you activate like Goes in Match against the deck and they have one monster on board, and then they enter battle and you activate Drowning and just shuffle away that one monster, it wouldn't be like too bad. It's just, again, this card really going second has a rough time, and in general, like Mirror Force has a rough time going second.
Another thing that is cool about it is that if they just happen to have a monster that can attack directly, but then they have like a board of like other monsters, like they have like Sky Striker Hayate, or if they have like some random other like monster, there is no like it's not specified that you don't have to have any monsters. It just has to be a direct attack. So if they do have something that just attacks directly, like the Leader Lusk. So then like stuff like that. So then they can't go into the Zeus. Their Hayate leaves the field. That's like kind of cool, but like those decks just aren't like relevant enough to like main deck this. But that is like a good note to know.
Yeah. Next is probably the best Mirror Force, which is Storming.
My personal favorite.
Yeah, this one's actually pretty good. So what this one does is when your opponent declares an attack, you can return all monsters all attack position monsters to your opponent's hand. This one is actually pretty good. So again, it's all kind of preference. I've heard people say that they don't like this because they just get the monsters back in hand and then they can just re-summon them. But the positive thing is, if they have like extra deck monsters, they go back into the extra deck. A lot of times, if the monsters go back in hand, you don't trigger their graveyard effects. And if they have like bricky, high-level monsters, you return them back to the hand, like they're not doing anything. Also, that doesn't target, and again, it doesn't target, it doesn't destroy. So it doesn't trigger any of those effects. So probably one of the better Mirror Forces. Also, it doesn't have to be a direct attack, so that part is actually quite good. Next is Blazing Mirror Force. This is probably like a B tier card. It really depends on the deck. You can put it in B or C, probably C, because it's very situational. It's kind of like Quaking. You really only play this in like a burn deck, and even in a burn deck, it's really not the best card, because in the closest thing, so there's no modern burn decks, but the closest thing to a modern burn deck, you want to play just a bunch of chainable trap cards. And this is not a chainable trap card, because if your opponent if your opponent realizes you're playing a burn deck, they're gonna start playing like summoning out a bunch of back row removal cards. So you want chainable burn cards, or chainable attack prevention / damage prevention, Wabuku, threatening roar, stuff like that. You want burn cards like Secret Barrel. You want chainable stuff. And the problem with this card is you have to wait till your opponent enters the battle phase, then declares an attack, then you get to activate this card. So it's a little slow. And sometimes it destroys all attack position monsters, and then it inflicts damage to you, then your opponent. So sometimes you can actually end up killing yourself with this card, which is another sort of issue. So that's Blazing. And then we've got Mirror Force Dragon. So this one's a little tough to rate. I'll be honest with you. As a card, like, this card's very good. It's very, very strong. Basically what it does is, if your opponent declares an attack or targets, just a card you control?
A monster you control.
Yeah, if it targets a monster you control or declares an attack or a monster you control, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. That effect is actually kind of crazy. Like, if you can create a modern end board, and then you could also end on this card, like in isolation, this card is actually really, really, really good. The problem is you have to play, Fang of Critias, or
Fang of Critias, and then
regular Mirror Force, which sucks. That's the problem with this card. Like, it's actually a very, very strong card to have on an end board, because in a lot of ways it's actually a tough card to out, and it baits things even if it's not tough to out. So like, either your opponent's going to try to target it and lose all their stuff, or your opponent will waste the forbidden droplets on this card and not target it. You know what I'm saying? Either way, it's a very good card to end on. If you can end on like a Borreload Savage Dragon and a Baron de Fleur, and then throw this thing on top of it, that would be a pretty good end board, because then they basically, any monster they target, they just blow up their own board. So in isolation, very good card. The problem with this card is the summoning conditions requiring this card are just very, very bad. Fang of Critias isn't searchable. And unfortunately, Fang of Critias isn't searchable, and on top of Fang of Critias not being searchable, Mirror Force is just barely searchable. It's searchable through this horrific trap card, a Mirror Force Launcher, but again, we've already described why that is so bad and why that is slow. So that's really what's holding back this card. If there was just an easy way to summon this card, like a generic easy way to summon it, where you could just always end on something like this, it would be actually a very strong card. Now, there's one thing you may have noticed about this tier list, which is there is no S tier. And that is because the realistic situation here is that Mirror Force simply sucks in today's metagame. They have to redesign Mirror Force. They have to throw them a bone. They have to create something that is actually worth playing. Mirror Force as an archetype is just far, far, far too outdated and too slow. You cannot wait until the battle phase in order to have a card that cannot be activated until an attack is declared. It is just too slow. So a couple of ideas that we had for redesigning this card, and honestly, I don't even know if this card would probably see play, but again, it would still be debatable. Basically, they need to create a Mirror Force that you can activate from your hand,
or is a counter trap.
Yeah,
either just negate it. It's like,
yeah, it has to be a counter trap, or it has to be activated from the hand. Like, that's the only way to do it. Maybe even if you take it to the most broken extreme, let's say there's a Mirror Force that says when your opponent declares an attack, you can activate this card from your hand, banish all monsters your opponent controls face down. Even when you take it to that outrageous extreme, I still don't even know if that card would be meta playable. because that's just how far gone Mirror Force has become. Because again, like, no one's going to enter the battle phase without having at least one negate on the board. In a lot of ways, that card is actually a worst evenly matched. Like, that would be the greatest Mirror Force card ever printed, and it's still a worst evenly matched, because at least with evenly matched, no one even has to declare an attack. You can just enter battle phase and then banish your entire opponent's, like, front row and back row. But with this new Mirror Force, it still wouldn't even be broken enough, because you couldn't even trigger it yourself. You'd still have to wait for your opponent to attack. Overall, this archetype just needs to be kind of redesigned. It's just been power crept beyond playability, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because like all of these cards, like, they all look nice. They all have like such nice artworks, and like in higher rarities they look gorgeous. Like I know Storming, Drowning, regular Mirror Force, I know they're all in secret rares. I think Mirror Force Dragon is also in secret rare, and they look insanely nice. Like there's some of the beautifulest cards, but like it's just not good enough. And then, like, let's say you do catch your opponent off guard in like game 1, like game 2, they're not gonna fall for it again. It's not gonna happen. It's yeah. There's not much you can say. It's just
It's
it's
not
just
good
too
enough.
slow now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's just so many better cards. Like, even if they made like trap tricks, if they made a whole archetype around it, like,
Yeah.
like the whole cards are just so much better than these anyway. So it's like it still wouldn't work out.
Yep. But let us know in the comments section, how would you redesign Mirror Force? But thank you for watching, and have a terrific day.
La 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 la.